Hey everyone. So remember back in my screen ranking when I got a phone call? Well, it turns out that was foreshadowing because today I'm going to be ranking the Universal horror movies. Specifically those of Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, Wolfman, Phantom of the Opera, and Creature from the Black Lagoon, including the Abbott and Costello movies. That comes out to 32 movies in all, so strap in, this is going to be a long one, and because some of these movies are almost 100 years old, spoiler alert for all of them. Starting off, my number 32 is She-Wolf of London. This movie actually takes things in an interesting new direction, but the execution is so lacking that it doesn't really work. The acting is meh, the technical aspects are nothing special, and the writing is subpar. The climax is especially disappointing, since a big part of it is just the villain explaining their whole motive to the hero for no reason other than so that a third character can overhear them and tell everyone else. Okay, so now getting into spoiler territory. So there is no wolf in this movie. It's just one woman framing and gaslighting another for these grisly attacks, when in reality it's just her all along. There is no wolf, it's just a human being doing all this.
How do you feel? Answer me, how do you feel?
I feel terribly sleepy. As if I'd been drugged.
You're right. I drugged you.
So I wouldn't hear the dogs?
No, Phyllis. I'm going to kill you.
Kill me?
Yes. Yes. You see, if the police came while you were still alive, they would investigate the strange story you would tell them. They would call in a doctor. And he would find that you were perfectly sane.
That could have been interesting, but like I said, the execution was lacking. My score is 2 out of 5. Number 31 is The Mummy's Curse. The trio of later hour-long Mummy sequels all just kind of blend together in my head. Also, thanks to the 25-year time-skipping universe and the established timeline of the previous movies, this one technically takes place in the 60s, even though it came out in 44. Between this one, Tomb, and Ghost, this one is definitely the least memorable. It's almost completely identical to Ghost in terms of its plot, except it takes place in Louisiana instead of Massachusetts for some reason.
It's so hard to explain. Sometimes it seems as if I belong to a different world.
Hey, looks like the imprint of a man's body. A big man, too.
Unless I'm mistaken, a mummy was buried here.
In a room beneath the chapel, I found the bodies of freshly murdered men.
Betty, what happened?
He brought me here. I was looking for you.
Master, I meant no harm.
The only thing that really helps this movie stand out is the Lady Mummy. My score is 2.5 out of 5. Number 30 is The Mummy's Tomb. This movie is 61 minutes long, and the first 10 minutes are spent recapping the previous movie. So the fact that I have it ranked above Curse probably says more about that movie than it does about this one. The directing is slightly better, so that's something. Lon Chaney Jr. is great as always. And the rest of the acting ranges from pretty good to subpar. And the technical aspects are adequate.
Spawned from the depths of doom comes the most fearful monster of the ages, to strike with paralyzing terror the despoilers of ancient tombs. Here is new horror by the master of menace, Lon Chaney as the Mummy, with Dick Foran, John Hubbard, Ellis Knox, George Zuko, Wallace Ford, Turon Bay, in The Mummy's Tomb.
The creature that's been alive for over 3,000 years is in this town, and it's brought death with it. We've got to run it down.
My score is 2.5 out of 5. Number 29 is The Mummy's Ghost. This is the best of the last 3 Mummy movies, and that's not really saying much. Lon Chaney Jr. and John Carradine are both pretty great, but the rest of the acting is nothing special. It is kind of funny to me that everyone in the universe is just so quick to believe that the mummy is real. Like, skeptics are few and far between. This movie delivers the chills. It just does it one slow step at a time.
There's no thief that killed Ben, Mrs. Evans. And nothing human tore through that wall.
I'll take her back, Harris. Together we'll go to Arkham. I swear it. You can't go in that swamp. It's certain death. Let go of me.
My score is 2.5 out of 5. Alright, finally moving away from the mummy for a bit. Number 28 is The Invisible Man's Revenge. This is easily the weakest of the Invisible Saga, but it's not awful. The revenge storyline is confusing and sometimes boring. There are some interesting elements, like human blood as the cure for invisibility and the pet experimentation. There's some surprisingly good comedy, especially the whole bit with the dart game. The special effects are the best of these early Invisible movies, but that's about it. The acting is fine, I guess. Cinematography and editing and music, they're all fine. My score is 2.5 out of 5. Number 27 is The Creature Walks Among Us. This movie had the potential to be an improvement on its predecessor, but the execution is lacking. The acting is fine, the writing is okay, the effects are solid, but overall it just feels like a missed opportunity.
Never before was science so determined. From the deeps of the Caribbean to the underwater jungles of the Everglades, they baited their trap and gambled their lives to put a daring dream to the test.
Gentlemen, the creature can be changed. We can make the giant step and bring a new species into existence.
Here was the grimmest cargo ever to reach civilization. Was this a new being created by a miracle of science?
Fire burned away the outer scale. There's a structure of human skin underneath it.
They do some kind of surgery on the gill man to make it an air breather, for some reason. I know in universe it's because of, like, injuries or whatever, but, like, really, writers, what was the point? They didn't really do much with it. He just wanders around and eventually attacks someone for trying to attack someone else. My score is 2.5 out of 5. Number 26 is Revenge of the Creature. This movie is decent enough, but it's a big step down from the first movie. It was cool to see Clint Eastwood in his very first acting role, so that was something. The Gillman suit looks great, and the physical performances by the stuntmen who play him are genuinely great. But the problem is that this movie just lacks the thrills of the first movie, especially because, unlike in the first movie, the characters are about as stupid as you'd expect them to be. The Gillman gets taken to a water park in Florida, and it goes about as well as you'd expect.
The Gillman has escaped. Please clear the ocean area. Get out, everybody. The Gillman has broken out of his tank. Clear the area. Return to your cars. Don't approach the beach side of the ocean. You'll probably be heading toward the water.
Humans is stupid. My score is 2.5 out of 5. Alright, if there's going to be any controversy in this ranking, this might be it. My number 25 is The Phantom of the Opera. Between this and Nosferatu, I've come to the conclusion that I'm just not a very big fan of silent films. Don't get me wrong, I intend to watch Mel Brooks' silent movie as soon as I can get a hold of it. Seriously, where the hell do you even find that? But just standard silent movies don't do it for me. The technical aspects are all very impressive for the time. Lon Chaney's performance is excellent. But I don't know, I don't really find this movie all that memorable, because sound is such a big part of the cinematic experience for me that when a movie is lacking it, it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't stay in my mind as much. My score is 3 out of 5. Number 24 is The Invisible Woman. This is the most comedic film of the Invisible series, and the comedy is actually pretty good, especially the butler's pratfalls. The musical score is also really good. There's not much horror to be found, and it also suffers from a very unnecessary romance. With that being said, the titular Invisible Woman is fully fleshed out and actually has her own agenda and agency.
Come, Mrs. Bates, I'll finish that for you.
You'll never come back. You're fired. All right, eyes front, chin up, shoulders back. Come on, get going.
And she's even the one to save the day with her own powers and wits. That's actually pretty progressive for 1940. My score is 3 out of 5. Number 23 is The Mummy's Hand. This one is not great, but it's definitely a step up from the later 3 movies. It's sort of a pseudo-remake of the 1932 film, though they do make some changes. The acting and the cinematography are both pretty good. This movie is more comedy than horror, but there is still plenty of horror, and the comedy is pretty good.
Look deep into the waters of Kar. Behold, over 3,000 years ago, the Princess Sananka died. that she was buried with all the ceremony due her exalted station. Ananka's father, King Amenophis, bade her a last farewell. And thus, the Princess Ananka was placed in a tomb. Charis, a prince of the royal house who loved Ananka, looked on in grief. His devotion was so great that he refused to believe that she was lost to him forever.
You can definitely see the influence that this movie had on the 1999 Mummy movie. My score is 3 out of 5. Number 22 is Invisible Agent. Despite being fairly obvious propaganda, this movie has a great premise, although the execution is just good. The cast is solid, they do a good job of creating atmosphere.
There's an enemy spy at large, an invisible man.
It's amazing. Oh, you will be of great help to us.
Who is this terrifying Phantom Commando? What is his amazing mission? See The Invisible Agent, suggested by H.G. Wells' Invisible Man, starring Ilona Massey and John Hall, with Peter Lorre, Sir Cedric Hardwicke, J. Edward Bromberg, Albert Basserman, in the most amazing story of our times.
Stop! Steady now. Don't let him get away.
The set design is genuinely great, and the comedy is actually pretty decent. This movie is more of a spy thriller with some comedy mixed in than actual horror, but it still has that Universal monster feel to it. So, you know, that's something. My score is 3 out of 5. Number 21 is House of Dracula. This one had a great premise, it just didn't really live up to its full potential. So Dracula and the Wolfman both visit the same doctor seeking cures for their ailments. Okay, decent setup. However, Dracula's real plan is to turn the doctor into another vampire. Frankenstein's monster is also there.
I am Count Dracula. You see before you a man who has lived for centuries, kept alive by the blood of innocent people.
When the full moon rises, I turn into a werewolf, with only one desire, to kill.
I tried to perform the miracle of science and failed. My blood is contaminated with the blood of Dracula.
It's only 67 minutes long, so it doesn't outstay its welcome, but they honestly could have made it 5 to 10 minutes longer and used that time to flesh things out a bit more, because they feel a little rushed. The acting is solid, the set design is on point, and the music is also pretty good. My score is 3 out of 5. Number 20 is Son of Dracula. This one is basically Southern Gothic vampire horror as a mystical noir, and it's pretty memorable because of it. It's just not great. It's full of great acting and atmosphere, and Lon Chaney Jr. puts in a solid performance as Count Alucard. The shot of him floating over the swamp in a trance is genuinely great.
I see you marrying a corpse, living in a grave.
The vampire can assume very many different forms at will. Sometimes it appears as a bat, and sometimes as a small cloud of swirling vapor. In this way, it can move unseen among its enemies.
Son of Dracula, searing the screen with new terror in this weird tale of the living dead who rise from the grave at night to prey on unsuspecting victims. with Louise Albritton, Robert Page, Evelyn Ankers, Frank Craven, J. Edward Bromberg, and Lon Chaney as the new Count Dracula, you'll shudder at the screen's most fascinating woman vampire, luring men with cold beauty and the promise of immortality.
The practical effects are also great, and I actually love the bleak ending. My score is 3 out of 5. Number 19 is The Ghost of Frankenstein. Sulfur pits, Igor, angry villagers with dynamite. This is my least favorite of the original Frankenstein run, but it's still a pretty fun movie. Visually speaking, it's great. The cinematography is pretty great for the time, and the costume design and set design are on point. The acting is pretty good, the music is great.
Christine! Ask your friend to bring you down, dear. Ask your friend to bring you down.
Please take me down to Daddy.
Tell him no one will hurt him.
Take me down. My daddy says no one will hurt you.
And the script is pretty tight. I just wish it was more memorable. My score is 3 out of 5. Number 18 is Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. This is my least favorite of the Abbott and Costello feature films I've seen, but it's still pretty fun.
Arms. 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 Keep playing. Arms.
Hey, you sit over here.
Oh, one. Arms. Arms.
The humor is more scattershot than their earlier works thanks to many of the gags having been overused by this point, but the comedy still hits more than it misses. The chemistry between the leads is as great as ever, the plot is serviceable, and there are some solid visual gags. My score is 3 out of 5. Number 17 is House of Frankenstein. This was supposed to be another big monster mash, but Dracula is only in the first third of the movie, and Frankenstein and the Wolfman are barely on screen together. It's all tied together by a string, thanks to a mad scientist played by Boris Karloff, who is great in the role. Still, the writing is solid, the acting is great for the time, and the music is on point. If nothing else, it's at least a step up from Ghost.
I'm going to repay you for betraying me. I'm going to give that brain of yours a new home in the skull of the Frankenstein monster.
The jugular vein is severed. Not cut, but torn apart as though by powerful teeth.
A werewolf. Last night I killed a man,
You didn't know what you were doing.
but I did. I wanted to kill.
I think they're after Dracula.
My score is 3.5 out of 5. Number 16 is The Invisible Man Returns. This is the only regular Invisible sequel that comes anywhere close to matching the quality of the first movie. Like, the first movie wasn't a masterpiece or anything. I honestly think the 2020 version was better, but that 1933 film still set the bar pretty high. I like that they switched things up by having this Invisible Man solve a murder instead of committing over 100. Vincent Price is great in the lead role, and the rest of the acting is decent at worst.
Take care of yourself, darling.
I'll be all right. Helen, don't look at me like that.
Jeffrey, he didn't kill Michael.
Oh, didn't he? That shows how little you know, dear old Richard.
No!
I'm going to force the truth out of you, choke it out of you.
No, don't shoot! No!
Got him! You got him?
The special effects are a step up from the first movie's already impressive effects. Unlike some of the other sequels, the events of the first movie actually play a part in shaping the plot of this one, so that was a nice touch. My score is 3.5 out of 5. Number 15 is Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man. This one is a step down from Meet Frankenstein, but it's still a solid comedy movie. Both Abbott and Costello give one of their best performances here, and the rest of the acting is solid. The script is tight, the music is pretty good, and the effects are, somewhat surprisingly, actually on par with the regular Universal Invisible movies.
Let's shake hands on it. Boy.
There are some jokes that don't work, but most of the humor is on point, and the highlight is easily the Invisible boxing match. My score is 3.5 out of 5. This one is probably going to be even more controversial than my 1925 Phantom ranking. My number 14 is the original Dracula. This movie's biggest problem is that it was made by a studio that was still coming out of the silent era. And it shows with how little dialogue there is between characters. Holy shit. I want more people talking in my movie. Like, I don't want a movie to be all people talking and nothing else, but give me more than this. Also, the pacing is pretty slow, even by these standards, and the ending is very anticlimactic. Out of all the first movies from each series in this franchise, OG Dracula, OG Frankenstein, OG Wolfman, etc., this is the only one that I don't consider to be great. Unless you include Phantom 25, then that's the second one that I don't consider to be great. Todd Browning's directing is fine, but it's clear he was relatively new to this. He definitely improved by the time he made Freaks the following year. Remember that movie? That's actually a pretty fun movie. Bela Lugosi is fantastic, and the rest of the acting is good if not great.
I am Dracula.
Oh, it's really good to see you. I don't know what happened to the driver and my luggage and... Well, and with all this, I thought I was in the wrong place.
I bid you welcome. Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
The writing is mostly great, and the set design and music are on point. My score is 3.5 out of 5. Number 13 is also Dracula, except this is the Spanish version. This movie is half an hour longer than the English version. What is his name? Carlos Villarius. Huh? Fuck. How do you pronounce that? Okay. I didn't anticipate having to do this, but my knowledge of Spanish is failing me. Normally, 2 L's in a row sounds like a Y. So does that mean this man's name is pronounced Valerius or Villarius? Because Villarius just sounds wrong even in Spanish. So I'm going to say Valerius and just hope that's right. So, Carlos Villarius is great as Dracula, but he is no Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi, Carlos is great, but Bela is phenomenal. However, aside from those two things, this is the superior version of the film. Now, for those of you who don't know, here's what happened. After the English crew would wrap filming every day, the Spanish crew would come in and use the same sets to film their version at night. And they would use the dailies from the English crew as references to copy what they liked and improve where they could. The result is a film that's better shot, edited, and just better made overall than the English version. It has many of the same problems, including the anticlimactic ending, but overall I think it's a step up. Carlos Villarius is not as good as Bela, but overall the acting is just as good.
Miren, dedos agarrotados en la rueda, como si estuviesen congelados. Moriría de pavor. ¡Qué tragedia tan terrible! Lo que es de las velas, no queda ni un jirón. Ha de haber sido terrible la tormenta. ¿Y los marineros? ¿Qué habrá sido de ellos? ¡Maestro! ¡Maestro! ¡Ya estamos aquí! ¿No me oyes, maestro? ¡Maestro! ¡Maestro! ¿Qué será eso? Dice que sale de aquella escotilla.
And in this version, Lupita Tower as Eva, the equivalent of Mina, is the standout. She went for it, and it worked. The score is 3.5 out of 5. Number 12 is Werewolf of London. This movie is very different from the 1941 Wolfman, but it's still really good. The makeup for the werewolf is not great in hindsight. Otherwise, this is a well-crafted thriller. The other effects are good, the acting is solid, the script is tight, and the music is great. What really sets this movie apart from The Wolfman is that it takes a more scientific approach to lycanthropy, with the botanist protagonist trying to find a cure for his condition. It's a very compelling story, and it's a shame this movie was overshadowed by The Wolfman. Don't get me wrong, that movie is better, but this one is pretty damn good too. The score is 3.5 out of 5. Number 11 is Phantom of the Opera, the 1943 version. This is the movie that made me realize I'm not a big fan of silent movies, because the 1925 version is arguably more impressive for its time than this one was for its time. But I would pick this movie every time simply because it has sound. Okay, there are other reasons too, that's just the main reason. The sets and costumes are on point, the music is excellent, the cinematography is great for the time, and the same goes for the editing. Claude Rains is fantastic as the Phantom, Susanna Foster is great as the woman who is technically the hero of the film, and Nelson Eddy and Edgar Barrier are very funny and charming as her two love interests. My absolute favorite part in this movie is at the end, when they both show up to invite her to dinner. One of them already has a dinner reservation for two, and the other is planning on getting one. When they both ask Christine to choose, paying off something that was set up earlier in the movie, she tells them she's decided to stay single and focus on her career. So, I shit you not, they just turn to each other and shrug as if to say, at least we tried. Then, the one who actually has the dinner reservation asks the other something to the effect of, shall we? The other man's response is basically, you know what, I'd be delighted. Not only is it very progressive for 1943, but the nonchalant way that these two men, who have been romantic rivals up to this point, just agree to go to get dinner together will never not crack me up. My score is 4 out of 5. Alright, now we're in the final stretch. Full disclosure, 7 through 10 are all neck and neck, so although the order has not changed between writing this and recording it, it might change between recording it and editing it. With that in mind, my number 10 is The Mummy. I saw the 1999 Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser before I ever saw this one, so it's cool to watch this one for the first time and see the various elements that movie borrowed, used, and reinterpreted. Also, props to this movie for having the female lead get herself out of trouble instead of having to be rescued. Nowadays, that's par for the course, but in 1932, that was not a common occurrence.
Alan! Alan!
Helen!
Oh, Isis, holy maiden, I was thy consecrated vestal. I broke my vows. Save me now. Teach me the ancient summons, the holy spells I've forgotten. I call upon thee as of old.
Nebet Etophanes.
The acting is great for the time, especially Boris Karloff. The plot is very obviously just Dracula with a new coat of paint, but I actually think they did it better. Like Dracula, the pacing is slow and I kind of wish there were more dialogue between the characters, but overall the writing is very good. The technical aspects are at least a little better than they were in Dracula. The costumes and sets are well done and the makeup is great. The music does an excellent job of creating a foreboding atmosphere. My score is 4 out of 5. Number 9 is Son of Frankenstein. Full disclosure, I couldn't stand Igor when I first saw this movie. My feelings have changed since then. At first I thought that he was just annoying, but now I'm realizing that I actively hate him. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what they were going for. That was the intention. Bela Lugosi does a fantastic job of creating this absolutely despicable character who manipulates both Wolf von Frankenstein and the monster himself. Also, I'm not a fan of the decision to make the monster blind. I get that it brought us this, the classic, I get that it brought us that, but I liked it better when he could actually see things. I don't know, maybe it's just me. So that made me appreciate this movie even more. The technical aspects are just as good as those in Bride, if not better, though the story is slightly less compelling. Boris Karloff is excellent as the monster, Basil Rathbone and Josephine Hutchinson are great, and Donnie Dunagan? I don't know how you pronounce that. He's a surprisingly good kid actor. Also, the music here is some of the best in the franchise. My score is 4 out of 5. Number 8 is Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. This was the first time Universal attempted a monster mash, and the results were genuinely great. Lon Chaney Jr.'s performance here is one of his best as Larry Talbot, and since this movie is more of a Wolfman movie than a Frankenstein movie, we get to spend plenty of time with him as he anguishes over his curse. As far as Frankenstein goes, Bela Lugosi's performance is great, and the film is definitely a big step up from Ghost. I'm still not a big fan of the blind monster, but I don't really mind it in this movie. It didn't annoy me as much. The script is tight, the set design is top-notch, the music is solid, and the action is very good for 1943. My score is 4 out of 5. Number 7 is Dracula's Daughter. This movie takes a bit to get going, but once it does, I honestly think it's a step up from Dracula. The technical aspects are all better, and the climax actually felt, well, climactic. What I love about this movie is that it is a character study with a female villain protagonist who is not made out to just be straight up evil. For 1936, they might as well have had a lesbian sex scene.
I'm ready now.
Oh my.
I suppose you'll want these pulled down, won't you? Yes.
Oh my.
Finish your wine, it'll warm you. Stand by the fire for a moment. You mustn't catch cold. Why are you looking at me that way? Won't I do? Yes, you'll do very well indeed.
Oh my.
Damn it, okay. Lily. This is very old and very beautiful. I must show it to you. I don't think I'll pose tonight. I think I'll go if you don't mind. Please don't come any closer.
What I love about this movie is that Maria genuinely wants to get better. She genuinely wants to overcome her vampiric ailment. But Sandor, her Renfield, keeps manipulating her because she promised him immortality and he wants that immortality, damn it, and he can't get that immortality if she's no longer a vampire. Gloria Holden is fantastic in the lead role, and since this is a character study, we get to spend plenty of time with her. And the rest of the acting is good if not great. This movie also adds a strong but interesting wrinkle to Dracula lore. Like in the first movie, we get the classic line, "I never drink wine."
Sherry, Maria?
Thank you. I never drink wine.
At face value, it's just a clue that she's a vampire, and vampires only drink blood. Later in the movie, however, we see her drinking wine. This suggests that vampires are perfectly capable of drinking certain beverages. So, why do both Dracula and his daughter have an aversion to wine? Well, there are three possibilities which I will list from least favorite to most favorite. First, they both just don't like wine. Second, it's because vampirism is satanic and wine is the blood of Christ or whatever. Third, my personal favorite, it's because alcohol is a blood thinner. Also, now that I've seen Renfield, and we know for sure that Renfield is canon with the 31 movie, and there's a very good chance that it's canon with the rest of these movies as well, Renfield's confirmation that Dracula is manipulative and abusive just makes the events of this movie all the more tragic. My score is 4 out of 5. Number 6 is The Wolfman. This movie is about 70 minutes long. In that time, it manages to establish about 5 or 6 reasonably developed characters: Larry, Sir John, Gwen, Maleva, Bella, and arguably Frank Andrews, and be not only a story about a man who gets bitten by a werewolf, but also a story about the complex relationship between an estranged father and son, a story about the dual nature of man, a really sad love story,
I'm going away.
Away? But why?
I gotta go. I can't stay here any longer.
Oh, let me go with you. I'll fetch a few things and be back in a minute.
No. I'm going alone.
But I can help you.
You wouldn't want to run away with a murderer, would you?
Oh, Larry, you're not. You know you're not.
I killed Bela. I killed Richardson. If I stay around here much longer, you can't tell who's going to be next.
You wouldn't want to run away with a murderer, would you? And a pretty solid psychological thriller/mystery. It's one of the most tightly plotted films ever made, but it gets no love in that regard on account of being known mainly for being the first great werewolf movie. My score is 4 out of 5. Number 5 is Creature from the Black Lagoon. This film is from 1954. The opening scene is a discussion of evolution, and the rest of the movie features a female scientist who is treated as an equal by her male peers. Imagine that!
Could it possibly belong to a Pleistocene man?
The chances are much greater that hand belonged to an amphibian, Mark. One that spent a great deal of time in the water.
Well, then how do you account for the structure of the fingers? Obviously for land use. What do you think, Dr. Matos?
We can be sure of one thing. Whatever it was very powerful. You say you have hopes of finding the rest of the fossil?
As soon as I get a suitable expedition together.
Well, why don't we make up the expedition? We're here now, and after all, it does come under the heading of our work, doesn't it, David?
It certainly does. More and more, we're learning the meaning and the value of marine research. Look over here. This lungfish, the bridge between fish and the land animal. How many thousands of ways nature tried to get life out of the sea and onto the land. This one failed. He hasn't changed in millions of years.
This movie truly stands out among all the others here, more so than either of its sequels. From the location to the monster to the human characters, this is very unique. Unlike the sequel, this movie isn't full of supposedly intelligent scientists making stupid decisions. These characters try to make the best decisions they can given the circumstances, and it's a treat to watch. The Gilman suit is great, and the stuntmen portraying him give great physical performances. Richard Carlson, Julie Adams, and Richard Denning are all solid in their lead roles, and the supporting cast are at least decent. The cinematography is on point for the time, and the underwater scenes are especially impressive. My score is 4 out of 5. Number 4 is the original Frankenstein. Considering this movie came out the same year as Dracula, it's interesting how much better it handles the integration of sound into the filmmaking process. It's still slow-paced by today's standards, but not to the same extent. The script is pretty tight, and there was more humor than I expected when I first watched this. The acting is pretty consistently solid. Colin Clive and Dwight Fry are great as Dr. Frankenstein and Fritz respectively, and Boris Karloff is fantastic as the monster.
It's moving. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's moving. It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. Oh, in the name of God. Now I know what it feels like to be God.
The music is great, the monster's makeup is excellent, and the set design is top-notch. Where this movie succeeds more than most of the series is telling an emotional story. The scene of the father carrying his dead daughter through the streets is absolutely devastating, yet you still understand that the monster isn't evil. He didn't know any better. He is essentially a child. Hell, I don't think anyone in this movie is truly evil. Dr. Frankenstein never meant to hurt anyone, he's just trying to break new ground in science. Fritz is his assistant, and he's nowhere near as villainous as his successor, Igor. The monster has the mind of a child and doesn't know his own strength, and the villagers are justifiably upset when they find out a little girl is dead. It's gray on gray morality, and I love it. My score is 4 out of 5. Number 3 is The Invisible Man. This movie is a horror classic for a reason. Claude Rains absolutely shines in the lead role. The supporting cast is all good, if not great. The script is tight, the musical score is wonderful, and manages to stand out from the rest of the series. And the cinematography and editing are both great for the time. There's also quite a bit of genuinely good comedy mixed in. The scene where the Invisible Man is just skipping down the road in nothing but a pair of pants singing a little ditty will never not make me laugh.
Here we go gathering nuts in May, nuts in May, nuts in May. Here we go gathering nuts in May on a cold and frosty morning. Whoops!
Especially the part where Claude Rains genuinely tripped. And that was actually a mistake. Claude Rains almost tripped and fell, and he just went whoops and kept going. Where this movie absolutely shines is the special effects. Sure, there are some little things you could nitpick, like how the footprints at the ends technically should have been shaped like actual feet instead of shoes, but that doesn't change just how fucking impressive the effects are overall. This movie predates the advent of CGI by a good 50 years or so, and the invisibility effects hold up better than the equivalent effects in some modern movies. My score is 4 out of 5. Number 2 is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. This movie does an outstanding job of blending not one, not two, but 3 Universal monsters into an Abbott and Costello comedy. Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman are all played just as seriously as they have been in their own solo films, which just adds to the comedy going on around them.
You're just the one we're looking for.
Do you still want your exhibits?
Of course I do.
Well, here comes one of them now.
Let's shoot. Come on, Wilbur.
Lon Chaney Jr. genuinely gives one of his best performances as Larry Talbot. Bela Lugosi is back as Dracula for the first time since the original, and he's just as great here as he was in that movie. Glenn Strange reprises his role as Frankenstein's monster from House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula, and although I'm still not a big fan of the monster being blind, his performance is still great. The comedic leads are great as usual, and their chemistry and comedic timing are absolutely fantastic.
Well, there you are. Shall I wrap it up?
No, you idiot. You're going to take those down to my house of horrors and uncrate them. Because if that's the way you handle baggage, I'm going to have the insurance agent there to inspect them before I accept delivery.
Well, then it's going to cost you overtime because I'm a union man. And I work only 16 hours a day.
A union man only works 8 hours a day.
I belong to 2 unions.
My score is 4.5 out of 5. Finally, my number 1 is The Bride of Frankenstein. James Whale must have really upped his game after Frankenstein and the Invisible Man, because this movie is easily his magnum opus, at least out of what I've seen. Pretty much everything here is either on par with or a step up from the first movie. The acting is all great, especially Boris Karloff and Colin Clive. The cinematography is about as great as it could have been, given the technological limitations of the time, and the same goes for the editing. The sets, makeup, and costumes have all improved. The musical score is a contender for the best in the franchise. The fact that The Bride of Frankenstein is so iconic, despite having like maybe 5 minutes of screen time, is just a testament to how freaking memorable her design is.
friend.
Stand back! Stand back!
My score is 5 out of 5. Hey everyone, what's your ranking? How many of these movies have you even seen? Let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe and all that. If you don't like the video, tell me why, because I love getting feedback. And then like and subscribe anyway, so that you'll be notified when I upload new videos and you can give me feedback on those too. Whether it's to tell me why that video sucks, or just to tell me where I've improved. Or maybe both. That's all for now. Stay safe in these crazy times.